Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about my least favorite baseball card designs. This is just my opinion. This isn't from any list I got off the internet. These are just strictly my opinion, so let's get right into it. Number 10, 2014. So this card design isn't terrible, but one thing I don't really like about it is the placement of the fielding position. I think they could have put it a little better. It just seems like they just had to smush it in there. Also, I don't like the fact that the name runs sideways. You'll probably know that I'm not a big fan of card designs where the team name or player name runs sideways. But with that said, let's move on to number 9. Number 9, 1966. So, personally, I think that the 1960s were full of great, memorable, recognizable sets, and this is not one of them. This one just feels really basic to me, and there's not really much going on in this one. So I think when most people think of 1960s baseball cards, this doesn't come to mind. And that's all I can say because there's not really much about this design. So let's move on to number 8. Number 8, 1990. Now, I think the reason I don't like this set is because it's from the junk wax era of baseball cards, and something about this design just doesn't really stick out that much to me, and this will not be the last 1990s card design we'll see on this list. But that's all I can say about this design, so let's move on to number 7. Number 7, 1957. So the deal with this is pretty similar to the one with 1966. Like, there's a lot of good designs from the 1950s, and this is not one of them. It just feels a little too simple. Like, it's just text and a picture with a white border, and that's about it. And that's all I can say because there's not really much to say about this design. So let's move on to number 6. Number 6, 2002. Now, you might recognize this design from 2020 Archives because they brought it back for this year. But the main two things I don't like about this design is the color of the border that they used on the card. I don't really like that color. And the 2002 tops towards the top of the card doesn't really fit in, I don't think. But with that said, let's move on to number 5. Number 5, 2005. So the thing about this card I don't like is that the biggest thing is the last name and the last name only. It does have the full name of the player, but it's pretty small, and also it runs sideways. And I already said in number 9 that I don't like cards with players' names or team names that run sideways. So that's my main problem with this card design. Now let's move on to number 4. Number 4, 1996. So, in the mid to late 90s, there were a lot of horrendous baseball card designs out there, and this is one of the less horrendous ones there are. The distorted face in the bottom left corner doesn't really make any sense to be there, and I think this card would be just as fine if it was not there, but that's about all that's wrong with this card. So let's move on to number 3. Number 3, 1998. So once again, here we are with the goldish tan-colored borders that I'm not a fan of. I wish they would use white on most cards. I think that looks best. Also, if you don't look closely enough, the logos behind the name look kind of weird. But with that said, let's move on to number 2. Number 2, 1995. So, I do not like the border on this card. It looks terrible, just the way it's like jagged on the inside, closest to the picture. And also, I don't like the font they use for the name of the player. And that's just what makes this card terrible. I think if they used plain borders, it would have looked much better. But with that said, let's move on to the final worst card in my opinion.
And number 1 is 1994. This design is terrible. There's just way too much going on. Like the blue stripe that runs on the left side of the card and comes down and forms sort of a point. And then the green behind the name. And the orange or red or whatever color that is down at the bottom just makes this card absolutely terrible, and that's why it's my least favorite design on this list. And that is going to be all for this. I plan on making a top 10 best card designs video sometime soon, but until then, I'll see you next time. Goodbye.